All right, today we're going to talk a little bit about ancient Chinese religion and their beliefs. And we talked about some of the early dynasties, and we're going to kind of take a break from that and talk about how the Shang dynasty had a real effect on Chinese religion, not only then, but even today, and some of their beliefs some of the things that have come from that. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about by the end of this video, we'll talk about the end of the Shang dynasty and the new dynasty that came and how it came about and how that had kind of an effect on the religion and connected the religion and beliefs as well. Okay? Now, in the Chinese view, people who lived outside of Chinese civilization were barbarians. People went bar, 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 bar. Now, they didn't come up with a word. They didn't think people said bar, 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 bar like the Greeks did. Remember, the Greeks came up with the word barbarians because they believed that anybody outside of their culture spoke like that. But the Chinese view, they believed that the Chinese, their country was the center of the civilized world, and anybody outside of that were like hill people, mountain people, people that lived out in the forest that didn't know any better and weren't civilized and didn't have any culture and things like that. All right, so they kind of thought that they were better than all of those people. Now, from earliest times in their culture, the group seemed to have been more important than the individual, which is very selfless. It's not very selfish at all. And they believed that whatever was done needed to be good for everyone, not just individual people, which we could probably, in our societies, probably kind of learn from that today. Now, a person's chief loyalty throughout their life was to their family. What was most important was making sure that their family was taken care of. And the most important thing inside of that was respect for one's parents, which we should all probably do a little bit more of that. We'll let that sink in for a second. Just saying. And this made family central to Chinese society. It was very important to respect your parents and your family and do things that was best for them. Now, the Shang society did have social classes, and what social classes are is kind of levels of usually wealth is how it's kind of broken down. In our society, in the very basic form, now there's more than this, but in the basic form there are three. There are the rich, there is the middle class, and the poor. Now the Shang society was divided even more sharply. Instead of having three basic ones like we kind of have today, they had two. They had the nobles, which were really rich people, and peasants, which were poor. Not pheasants, not like the bird. Don't confuse that with the birds. They didn't have rich people and birds. They probably had birds, but that's not how their class was broken up into rich people and birds. These are peasants, not pheasants. Peasants were poor people. So you had the nobles and the peasants. And there was a ruling class of these nobles that were warrior. They were also warriors. So not only were they rich, but they were powerful and they knew how to fight and knew how to take control. And those warrior nobles were headed by kind of a smaller king, not the king of the whole Shang empire or dynasty. It was kind of a mini king that ruled over those little scattered villages within the Shang lands. And they were given that control by the Shang ruler, the big ruler of the dynasty that ruled over all of the dynasty. So it's kind of like there was the ruler of the dynasty. Then there was these kings that ruled over these little villages, okay? And I would kind of compare it to today how we have like maybe a mayor of a town and then the governor of a state. And even if you wanted to go further, the president of the United States. The mayor takes control of the city. The governor takes control of the state. But the mayor ultimately answers to the governor, just like the governor who controls the state ultimately answers to the president. Okay, kind of like that. Now, for these little kings, these smaller little kings to keep control, they sent a tribute, which was basically a payment to keep peace, to the Shang ruler in exchange for local control. Now, we talked about how they'd used oracle bones yesterday to kind of tell the future, and this is tied to religious beliefs. And family was tied closely to that religion. Now, the Chinese believed that the spirits of family ancestors had power to bring good fortune or disaster to the people that were living in the family today. So that could be a little iffy, and it kind of brought about the whole idea of you need to be good to your family while they're alive because they can make you pay for it after they're dead. So if you have this crazy Uncle Charlie that you can't stand, you still need to be nice to him because if you make him really mad, then he could do bad things to you after he dies. I know it's kind of crazy, but that's what they believed. Now, they didn't worship these ancestors as gods. They had their own gods. They believed that these family members could talk to the gods and influence what happens in their family that is living with their life. But they worshipped a supreme god named Shangdi and many lesser gods. So that made them polytheistic, which we talked about before, the worship of many gods or goddesses. And the Shang kings consulted the gods through oracle bones, and we talked about that yesterday, about how they put a question that they had maybe sculpted into a turtle shell or a shoulder blade of a cattle or something like that, gave them to a certain priest. And then that priest would put it over fire, and somehow the way that they cracked over the fire would be the answer to a question like, oh, should I go to war? Or will the harvest be good this year? Things like that. Now, around 1027 BC, a people called the Zhao overthrew the Shang, and they started their own dynasty. Now, when you start a new dynasty or you overthrow a leader of a country or a civilization, it's not something that's small. It's something that has to be justified. You have to have a reason for it. You can't just do it because then you have chaos. So what these people that started this new dynasty that overthrew the Shang, the Zhao, they had to justify it. And the way they did that is by something called the Mandate of Heaven. They declared that the final Shang king had been a very poor ruler, was not looking out for what was best for all of the Chinese people. So they said that the gods had told the Zhao people that, hey, the Shang rulers are no good anymore. We don't want them there. We're going to give you the rulership of China. So they overthrew the Shang ruler. And they basically said that, it was given to us by the gods. They approved us taking care of getting the Shang out of there. And that was known as the Mandate of Heaven. And it was basically an approval from the gods, a divine approval from the gods, saying that, hey, we approve that you guys are good rulers, you're going to take care of the people, and you have our blessing. Now, on the flip side of that, if someone was very evil or foolish or selfish, they could lose the Mandate of Heaven and lose the right to rule. Okay? So it started this whole dynastic cycle, which we're going to look at right here, where a new dynasty gains power. Everything's good, peaceful. They claim to have the blessing of the gods, the Mandate of Heaven. And then, things are peaceful. Everything's good. Everything's successful. Then, over time, with any type of country or rulership or dynasty, eventually things kind of go bad. You have good times, you have bad times. And in those bad times, people do mean things. They get corrupt. The taxes are raised. People are poor. They can't eat. They start to starve. They start to get angry. And then on top of that, other disasters which get blamed on the ruler of the dynasty, such as floods, famines, invasions, things like that. That takes a toll. So then people start to realize things aren't going real well. So the gods must think that the rulers aren't very good because all of these things are happening. The gods are making sure these things happen because the ruler's basically an idiot. And they've lost the Mandate of Heaven, the blessing of the gods. So then the people rebel. And that's their reason for it, is because they believe that the ruler doesn't have the blessing of the gods anymore, the Mandate of Heaven. So then the dynasty is overthrown through rebellion, a lot of blood is shed, people die, but then this new group takes over, and now they have the Mandate of Heaven, and the cycle starts over and over again. Okay? Now, eventually the Zhao dynasty will end, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but next time we're going to talk about the type of writing and how that helped the Chinese people during this time. So that'll be the next thing we do. Your assignment will be based on this video here that you have today. Watch it as many times as you need to so that you can get the answers, and then we'll talk about it then.